Hi, I'm Paul Caulfield, guest host with Cybercrime magazine and Chief Risk Officer at IDB Bank. We're here on Broadway in New York City, in the auditorium of the New York Institute of Technology. With us is Udi Mokady, CEO and founder of CyberArk, a leading provider of privileged access management. With us also is David Ortiz, Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer of Bed Bath & Beyond. Guys, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So we're here talking about privileged access management, among other things. So let's start with PAM. What's that 50,000-foot level description that you would give to the audience?
In one sentence, I would say it's securing the keys to the kingdom, securing the keys to the IT kingdom. Basically, privileged access is required to administer our IT infrastructure in the hands of good people. It's what they need to do in order to have a functioning, growing business. In the hands of a malicious insider or an outsider, allows full control and takeover of the network or the cloud environment. And so privileged access management is the discovery and management of these credentials that provide powerful access to the environment, both for humans that need that access, but also for applications. Because applications actually behave a lot like humans when they're accessing resources.
All right, so follow up. With PAM and CyberArk, founded in 1999, went public in 2014, how has PAM evolved? What was the kernel that led to the founding? And then how have you seen it evolve over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. So CyberArk, we're really pioneers of the space. We even coined the terminology and helped educate the world that this is the highest risk area on which the organization or the business of the IT runs. In early years, it was very much driven by either concerns about insiders or compliance drivers that had to put control over this. It could be different regulations. Here we would be talking PCI or SOX for public companies. But I think the biggest change in the last couple of years has been the acknowledgement that an outsider easily becomes an insider because of social media and the ease of which you can get that first foothold on an endpoint, and therefore it's also protection against advanced attacks. Advanced outsiders will want to leverage the privileged pathway if they want to get to a big breach, like the famous breaches of the last 10 years, Sony, Anthem, and the Office of Personnel Management, and almost everything you see on Wall Street Journal and others.
So David, having gone to NYU, you had a computer science degree?
Yes.
You know, some almost generation ago, computer science. How did it prepare you for the role that you fill right now?
Graduating from NYU was a wonderful experience, but yes, back then, which was 1989, was a very long time ago, computer science was a computer science degree. It really didn't have anything to do with security or information security. As we all know, the landscape has changed drastically since then. It wasn't really offered as a course or part of the curriculum.
So now, fast forward that generation, how have you seen either your skills evolve or the science evolve as you've gotten more and more experience with the information security side of things?
Sure. In my current role, which I've been at Bed Bath & Beyond for quite a while, as you've noted, we've seen the industry change drastically just at my current company. Initially, I was involved in launching our first website. After we launched our first website, we spent a good deal of time focusing on, I would say, infrastructure versus information security or security. Security was definitely a part of what we did, but it wasn't the focus of what we did. You could fast forward probably 14 years, and now we're having a lot more security conversations versus infrastructure conversations. This was around the time before, I would say, all the large retailer breaches were announced. I had gotten involved with information security at Bed Bath & Beyond, working with a phenomenal team back at the office. We recast our information security program. We got in ahead of a lot of the breaches being announced and really tailored our program to what we thought it should be to protect the organization.
Being proactive, how does an institution, whether it's a retail online or some other customer-facing entity, how do they stay proactive in connection with, say, privileged access management, something that's customer-facing?
Sure. We always evaluate what we do, obviously from a risk standpoint,
back in the day when you're developing a website, you're really only focused on developing a website and the security around that. When you start to include a lot of the newer technologies, cloud, DevOps, if you want to use that term, that's really where we see privileged access management coming into play as a strong control of your identity and access management program.
As you've seen, as you went from just a website to actual commerce, was there a certain line that you had to cross? Were there certain controls? What kind of processes did you need to go through to make sure, yeah, we got that covered?
I'd like to say we're a student of the history of breaches and looking at breaches and understanding and being a part of the conversations that the majority of breaches begin with an account being compromised. We wanted to focus there to make sure that we did not end up in the same position. So we looked and we strengthened our position with our own privileged access management implementation and making sure that that was part of our identity strategy as well.
Bed Bath & Beyond, Fortune 500 company. CyberArk works with Fortune 500 companies. Some information gathering that they internalized. What do you see, Udi, from those types of companies, whether they're publicly traded, maybe not even Fortune 500 size? Are they information sharing so they can internalize and get better?
Yeah, I think there have been many changes, as David alluded to, in the industry where it's understood now that it's a team sport, that there's no information security is not necessarily the competitive differentiation. I see companies within the same vertical definitely sharing ideas, sometimes at conferences like this or at get-togethers. And in our customer events, it's sometimes beautiful to see the banks talking together and retail talking together, but also across a bank talking to a retailer or a manufacturer. How did you overcome this? How did you move along with your program? So I think it's really modernized, just like everything else, where there's much more information sharing. And the second trend that David touched, it's moved from compliance driven to really worrying about this third party, which is the attacker. And I think that brings everyone together. We're the good guys trying to run our businesses and enable digital transformation, and we need to work together.
So with whether it's cloud or robotics, we're not talking about the human element here, but actual the automated. What do you like to see, or what value are you bringing for those types of controls?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen the evolution of privileged access management. The first and foremost is to put controls over the humans and just like David mentioned, make sure that the accounts can't be compromised and networks taken over. But then in a mature PAM program, you move and look at the applications. And applications behave like human and need to make these connections for access, and those are based on credentials. When it's static applications, it's a little easier to at least map and do. But when you move to DevOps and container-based and dynamic applications, an application can be up and running for milliseconds or a few seconds, and it's harder to control. The good news is you can get it right before you roll it out, and what we've seen is it's called secrets management. You can be part of securing that environment or that DevOps environment as applications get rolled. So it's almost in the cookbook. Applications go up, they're already the secrets are already managed, and so it's an opportunity for organizations to actually get their hygiene better because they're moving to modern infrastructure.
David, as the first line or the second line, trying to protect Bed Bath & Beyond with sales, what expectations, not to internalize it, but expectations that you'd have for products that Bed Bath & Beyond would be selling from, say, an Internet of Things type threat vector?
So as we've progressed with privileged access management, it's been a movement to ensure that we had the proper inventory of privileged accounts. That includes, system side and application side, as well as taking a least privilege approach and ensuring we had logging. So I think those things are fundamental components of it.
As Bed Bath & Beyond has moved from brick and mortar to online, what infrastructure controls did you need to see in place from a PAM management standpoint? Not necessarily the customer facing, but were there additional considerations that Bed Bath & Beyond had to look at?
I stress foundational security. It shouldn't matter if it's an on-premise data center, and it shouldn't matter if it's in the cloud. Treat it the same way. the same fundamental hygiene should be in place.
I think that's a very good approach. I mean, if you move workloads to the cloud and assume that's it, by moving it I'm done. That's not the approach. You need to move your security with you in this journey and take it as an opportunity to do it to put the hygiene in place as you're moving.
As a service provider, what are you hearing from your customers that either is surprising you or is driving, your mission?
I think for many years it was very much this, well, you're the ones protecting us from a minor cold, turning into a full network takeover or a cloud takeover, and we need to put this layer in place. The conversation has evolved, and I'm excited about it, to proactive protection, but also you're going to enable me to trust and go on these journeys of new technologies, because security wants to be an enabler. Security wants to adopt DevOps, for example. DevOps allows an organization, whether it's an airline or a bank or, of course, a retailer, to move applications faster for their consumers. And the organization wants to adopt that. The CISO with us and technologies like us can adopt new technologies in a secure fashion. So that excites me, and I think that has become kind of our new constitution. Proactive security, enable digital transformation.
David, with kind of next generation PAM management, what are your expectations from a resiliency standpoint? Like, what does maturity look like to you?
So maturity, to me, looks like we should be able to use it anywhere. We shouldn't have to focus and say, I'm using it on premise or I'm using it in the cloud. It should be extensible to everything that we're doing for the future. That includes the DevOps pipeline, that includes automation outside of that as well.
And then with monitoring or testing or looping back and testing the maturity or that kind of life cycle of maturation, how does that work in, say, a retail service provider?
So there's critical infrastructure that we manage that we don't really talk about too often, and that is an area that privileged access management really helps with. We want to make sure that those credentials that are running something as simple as a backup or some patching or other automation is definitely within the realm of privileged access management.
And we actually invest a lot in making sure that we integrate with those third-party applications that our customers may be using. They may be using a ServiceNow or a BMC for as a ticketing system or IT access management. They may be using a vulnerability scanner. All of those tools need privilege. They need access in order to do what they need to do. And they can also be a great junction for an attacker because you get access through a trusted system. And so we invest a lot in also out-of-the-box integrations with the other pieces of the infrastructure that our customers have.
Slightly off topic, I assume you have multiple vendors doing multiple things within your space. How do you coordinate that?
I hate to use the term best of breed, but I'm going to use the term best of breed. Vendors nowadays can do everything. We don't want the vendor to do everything. We want them to be specialized. So if we're looking at a privileged access management vendor, we don't need them to do other things in the industry. We just need them to be a specialist in privileged access management. If their product extends to a good solution within the identity and access management area, that's great. They've put the development and the time into it, and it's complementary to what they're doing. It's not just another tool on the tool belt looking to replace another vendor.
David, with the threats that are evolving, we've got technologies, good and bad, but we also have that human element. With your own staff, how are you managing them to keep pace with the change? Existing staff, but also recruiting new staff.
We talk about a profession and not a job. So you're in this profession, you're going to self-educate to a certain extent. You're going to be interested in what's happening out there in the industry. There's a lot of knowledge that you gain from that. In addition to doing any type of training, I encourage training, right? I encourage self-learning as well. I encourage talking to people like yourself, right? And learning about the industry. We gain a lot of our knowledge just through conversation, but the same things hold true, right? You're going to go out there and you're going to study for a particular area, or you're going to learn a particular technology.
Udi, the staying within the Fortune 500 company space, international, customer-facing, digital, mobile, cloud, are there commonalities that you're seeing at that kind of the big seat at the table versus the mom and pops, the singular, small online presence, or a singular presence within a country? Can you see differences? And if so, what are they?
Absolutely. You mentioned we work with half of the Fortune 500 and a third of the Global 2000, and the commonality is the security has become a pillar of their approach and and scalability. So they have to think about both of them. They have the multi-presence. It could be multi-international presence. It could be the multiple stores. It could be the need to be the uptime. And so the discipline is that everything has to be done at scale, and security has to be done at scale. And often I find, and I'm excited to see that, is that the security is perceived to be not a necessary evil, but a supporting of the business, a function that supports the business. And in those companies where there's tone at the top to that, where we see much more successful security programs.
Have there been seminal events over your career that you've seen that have helped management or the board see the light, that then result in increased resources, whether it's technology or employees?
There was a moment a few years ago with one of the larger breaches where I would say personal and professional advice blended into one another, where the awareness recommendations we would give from a corporate standpoint really started applying to the personal area of everyone's life. I would say that was an inflection moment where our recommendations became one and the same.
Because I guess that the mega breaches often caused damage to those brands involved, but they were also involved consumers in many cases, and people like us also as individuals. And I guess those kind of examples really raise awareness, of course, at the board level, but also employees and employee awareness.
How are you, as one of the leaders in this, speaking from the mountaintop and saying this is absolutely necessary because of the threats of lights going off permanently should we not do something? And not a scare tactic, but just reality.
Yeah, I think we find the balance even internally. We internally invest a lot in information security, and we invest a lot in our own product security. And as we preach this, to others, we do the same thing internally. But we also chose kind of a blue logo in a positive sense, where security doesn't have to be scary and I'll scare you into obedience, but actually can be a doable and measurable, and you can measure the impact, and therefore be an enabler. And it takes away some of that fear. In a lot of our programs with customers, we actually measure, where do we stand today? All right, we try to get to no credential left behind. Where are we on that path? Sometimes it's by flavor. All right, we covered all domain accounts. We covered our critical servers. You can feel the movement of the dial, and therefore progress. It's doable.
One thing I like at conferences and seminars, they talk about like what keeps you up at night. I won't put you on the spot here, but I'll project you out a few years, maybe 2 or 3 years. What should keep the industry up at night now because of some kind of proactive reading the tea leaves type threats that either are small now that might get bigger, or they just might get more voluminous or more impactful?
Technology's coming at us so quickly. There unfortunately is a lack of understanding of certain things nowadays. We live in a very complicated world of information security, but just something as simple as walking around with your mobile phone. There's so much that's happening on that mobile phone that the layperson doesn't really understand or doesn't care to understand. But looking forward into the future, we spend a lot of time talking about compliance and risk and now privacy. So all of those areas are blending, and if we try to peek ahead into the future and really look into it, it's us understanding and really knowing how to portray our own digital selves online so that we're protecting ourselves. It really has to be part of what each person does to protect themselves, which again would then cross back into their professional life. And you're bringing both your digital identity and your professional life and your personal life together. And if you look ahead into the future, each person is in control of that and will control it better. That's how I see it happening.
We think about the vacuum in qualified personnel. There being, I believe, the number is around 3.5 million jobs within this space over the next few years. If you're looking, or if you're speaking to that high schooler now, or that college student now, what are some skills that you'd want them walking in the door, knowing the threats that you see coming down?
Yeah, there's definitely a big shortage in general in information security professionals. I'm sure David sees it. We also see it specifically in the PAM space. There are some areas for optimism, just like you mentioned. You see high schools that are beginning to introduce programs like that. You see universities where there are cyber programs, and they're guaranteed, definitely in the next, in the foreseeable futures, to find a rewarding place to work where they're actually doing something meaningful and impacting the business. If I were to speak to them, I would tell you it's a line of work where you're always learning. Because the attackers are always innovating. There's nothing static about cybersecurity. The attackers are innovating. The infrastructure is changing. I mean, DevOps is now, we all use the terminology. Just a couple of years ago, it was a new way of rolling out applications, and of course, cloud. So I would say it's your way to join a dynamic industry where you can make an impact.
So David, for you, maybe the here and now, as you're looking to hire, and as you're looking to find that talent, what are some must-haves for you?
If it's, I would say, someone coming out of college, it's a level of understanding that we know they don't have real-life job experience. But I would say we cast a wide net, and when we look for candidates, and people can learn a technology, but it's really drive and the desire to learn. And those are really intangibles that when you come across a candidate and they have that, you want to invest in them. It is difficult to find people like that, but you do.
One of the ways to deal with the talent shortage is, of course, to introduce more and more automation. We're investing a lot on our end to make the tools smarter in terms of the deployment, auto onboarding of credentials, and in parallel, really training and having easy online certification courses, because there's demand for PAM experts out there. We've seen customers poaching from each other. We don't want that. And partnering a lot with third parties, advisory firms, value-added resellers. So it's kind of our way to introduce the capability into the industry, and also automation will help alleviate some of that. And just remember that we're also enabling, with automation, we're also enabling other technologies like robotic process automation. That is automating businesses, and we take care of the privilege angle in that.
Great. Well, Udi, David, I want to thank you both today for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.